What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to
Welcome.
the Bitcoin Stock Show. We got Charlie Spears on today's show doing a little co-hosting today. How are we feeling, Charlie?
I want to try to be reserved and say just fine, but man, it's a very very exciting day. Bitcoin all-time high. Everything is ripping. If you're in Bitcoin or even broader crypto, today is a very very good day in the West. No holds
Electric
barred. It's a very
vibes.
bullish 2025.
It is a very bullish one. We're an all-time high coinciding with a presidential election. That's a first. Never seen it. All that being said, we're going to talk a little bit about that today. We've got a fun show lined up, though, because we're going to do a little bit of an election recap, but we're also going to grill Frank Holmes, the co-founder and executive chairman of Hive Digital, on their Paraguay expansion and on HPC AI plays, all that good stuff. But we wanted to get his take on the election and what it means for the Bitcoin mining industry. So without further ado, we are welcoming Mr. Holmes to the stage. Frank, welcome to the Bitcoin Stock Show. How you doing, man?
It's great to be with y'all.
Great to have you here. Really appreciate you taking the time. This is one of my favorite shows that we do that every week. It's live. Usually gets a lot of people coming in, asking questions in the troll box. And it's great to get to sit down with guys like you, the shakers and movers within the Bitcoin mining ecosystem. But before we zoom in on Hive, let's take a little bit of time, and I just want to get your immediate reaction and thoughts to the election results from last night. Anything that you have to kind of set the stage. What are you thinking about?
Outstanding. It's just outstanding. It's all the FUD we've had to deal with, from centralized media places to really the decentralized platforms, and interviews like this are so significant, and it shows the incredible dynamics of American as a nation, its democracy, and the culture of we've got to right size and refit this, as we would say in business, zap the gap, and that's what we've done.
Charlie, do you have anything you want to follow up with?
Well, I'll just throw another question back at you. Like, okay, so you say, there was certainly a narrative that that it was maybe on a knife's edge, but then the people went to the polls, and we had a pretty overwhelming vote for Trump and overall Republicans. Like, thoughts on this?
You did, and that's what makes America so great. It really does. Is that they follow media platforms that are non-centralized, decentralized, and I think that is really quite significant versus what you see in Canada, where it's controlled, the CBC, or England is BBC. The same thing happens in Sweden and other places. So I think it's remarkable, and you can see where Harris had won was basically where there was no identity check. There was no ID. You can easily see that on a map today, but where there was an ID format and there was proof with a visual and your name, et cetera, they overwhelmingly voted for private property rights, for human rights, that is border. And I wrote about this a year ago. I have about 100,000 readers in 80 countries, and I wrote about the significance of open borders and what it did, that concept, what it would do in the US, and it'll become a major election. And why is that? Why is Bitcoin so significant to people? Because Bitcoin is about feeling safe, that you feel you have a portable wealth that's digital and it's protected. And so that idea, that concept is so important. And when open borders is taking place, well, people didn't feel physically safe. Bitcoin is a solution for feeling financially safe, that I can put this money over here. The bank's not going to come in and confiscate it. Or what they did in Argentina in 2002, all US bank accounts were basically shut down. I was there 6 months ago and a year ago, and you can't get any US dollars. Why is that? Well, because the government has shut it down using the control of the banks. But they can get Bitcoin, and that's outside of the realm. And therefore, people in Argentina, I was wondering why the economy was so resilient and so strong still. The ambassador from America said there's $25 billion of cash in pillows, in mattresses throughout Argentina, and that's what keeps the economy going. And I thought that was quite remarkable. And 2 weeks ago, I was in Lugano, Switzerland, at Plan B, and I was just shocked to find out that Tether is made more money than BlackRock with 10 trillion. Tether has 300 million, almost the population of America, 300 million wallets with $120 billion. And you scratch your head and say, why? Because they said in Latin America and Africa and Turkey, a place like that, they want to be able to have US dollars. And then they go on to explain that they have mined and own 52,000 Bitcoin. And they're in Paraguay also. So I thought, this is just a remarkable story of people wanting to have something over the reach from oppressive governments that are oppressive on your financial wealth and savings. And that's Bitcoin.
Yeah, and I wonder how much either we are overstating the impact of Bitcoiners and crypto holders on this election, or how much it might be understated on the national stage. Because one of the things that I think is really notable, and this all gets kind of caught up in the red wave that we saw, right? Obviously, Trump winning the presidency, the Senate is turning red. It's going to take a little bit of time for us to know for sure, but it looks like the House could also trend that way too. But one of the more notable things, just outside of Trump getting elected, and everyone's talking about how that's good for Bitcoin and crypto, right? You can look at of Congress members or senators like Sherrod Brown, who got unseated by Bernie Moreno. And Sherrod Brown has been one of the most vocal critics on Capitol Hill against Bitcoin. In fact, you're already seeing the mainstream media's gears turn. There are these articles that have been published by Rolling Stone and CNBC about the $40 million campaign to take him down, yada, 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 all that. But all that being said, behind the scenes of Trump are all of these other pro-Bitcoin and crypto politicians who are taking the stage over some of other politicians who were a little more hostile to the environment of Bitcoin and crypto. So all that said, kind of long-winded way to ask, do you think this is a real sea change or kind of a paradigm shift in how Bitcoin and crypto will be looked at on the national stage?
Oh, I think on the national stage and the global stage, already hearing from our facilities, Hive operates in 9 time zones. And so we are translating in 5 languages back to English and then back up to the mother ship where we have our mining facilities. So you could hear that sort of echo taking place in other countries. So I think it's quite significant. I gave a speech earlier this year in Paris, and I was trying to highlight that Bitcoin is all about private property rights. And if you want to take a look at the great digital transformation and the spokes in that big wheel, Bitcoin is so significant in the financial element of the digital transformation. And it is so powerful because we need to have something that protects those private property rights. And you can see centralist governments more so than ever are anti this private property right. And I think that idea is going to grow. The big part will be the big bank lobbyists. They're so anti-Bitcoin because they want to be able to control the fund flows. They don't like the 24/7. They don't like the capacity of what it's capable of doing. And I think that will still be the battle area next to define.
I'll throw you one last kind of question before I dip, and you guys can talk operations in Hive. But this leads into just the regulatory landscape for Bitcoin and digital assets in the U.S., which kind of often leads like how the rest of the West treats these assets. Does this make it more optimistic to mine Bitcoin in the United States? Is this a favorable or neutral?
Oh, I think it's hugely successful for the big issue is going to be the electricity. So the value of your electricity is just going to go up here in the U.S. And you can see that throughout the country because we also have a big race by HPC, high performance computing, for AI. That is a huge race for energy. That's what's basically woken up Core Scientific with Core Weave, hungry for energy to plug in all their NVIDIA chips. They're now basically co-locating and sourcing and putting it up with the capital because they have a gigawatt of electricity. So now all of a sudden America becomes a sort of safe jurisdiction for mining. There is no doubt the value of energy is going to be very important. I think that the positive part, it will fast track nuclear energy. It will fast track these modular units that are the size of a cup, and you don't have to be 5 miles away from where people live, urban centers. I think that what happened in March of this year was epic when AWS, which is the most profitable part of Amazon, went and purchased nuclear energy, and they basically spent $650 million to get 950 megawatts of nuclear energy. Well, all the greenies all stopped, like all the negative on nuclear energy, you didn't hear about it. And the attack that was using ESG to attack on all the public companies and what your ESG, it's all quiet. ESG funds are not relevant. That the significance was articulated 2-3 years ago. So I think there's going to be a regeneration of the value of energy. It's just south of San Antonio. There's some nuclear capacity and you're seeing that all of a sudden populate in Texas, not oil and gas, but nuclear and uranium, looking for enriched uranium. I think that this is going to, all of a sudden, America's going to start saying what we've done in fracking to become self-dependent, where we're independent from the rest of the world for oil and gas. We're going to do that with nuclear. We're going to do it with lithium. We're going to do it with copper, all the copper belt that goes up from Arizona all the way up to Wyoming. All those assets are going to get re-rated.
Well, as a guy whose family's been in oil and gas for half a century, I like to see that. We are bullish on energy, bullish on nuclear. And great talk with you, Frank. I'm going to tag in Colin and let him talk ops and Hive. You guys have a great day, and go Bitcoin.
Thank you,
Charlie. Thanks for joining, man. So, Frank, we're going to get into HPC and AI here in a second, but I have to ask, because you touched on this just now with the nuclear thing. We've seen the AWS deal that you were talking about. We've also seen Microsoft's deal with Celestial Energy restart 3 Mile Island. I mean, this nuclear renaissance that is going to be necessary to power these AI and HPC data centers, do you think this is going to be wholly private sector led? Do you think the government steps in at any point and actually does anything meaningful on the policy front to grease the wheels here?
I believe that there's already been policy changes for these, basically like microbreweries. Well, that's a good place to go to have a beer. Well, now it's going to be micro nuclear energy. And that idea and that concept has already been drawn out. And there's lots of money that's been spent on using modern day software, not the antiquated systems of how they manage this. So I believe that what you had to be with 5 miles from any urban area or a housing area to build up a new nuclear reactor. Well, that was so hard to build anything. That's all changed. Those rules are changing. And I think this will get fast tracked through the EPA to just the whole idea of embracing these modular units.
Yeah, that would make sense to me. And I feel like the thing that I just always come back to, I've said it multiple times on this show, looking at how electrical generation capacity in the US has stagnated from the 2000s on until the present is just completely absurd. And sometimes it makes me a little despondent, but I think we're moving in the right direction. And who would have thought that it would have been a major breakthrough in computing to move us that way? I mean, it makes sense, right? But anyway.
Just to give you sort of a macro picture, because I'm a macro global investor, and that was the sort of the journey that led me from the world of gold and having the first Eastern European fund. I was in the China region fund in '94. So I try to capture a big macro trend, and clearly Bitcoin was that path. And I tried to launch an ETF in 2017, realized it wasn't going to happen. It just happened this year. So, but I wouldn't put up the idea of crypto mining. Why? Because you're mining the virgin coin and you don't have a KYC or AML problem. I could turn around and bank it. I could put it in the bank and every day I'm putting away these coins. the difference, what I did was to try to have a model that was more like a royalty company. So when I look at the revenue per employee, say for Hive, we're over $5 million per employee. NVIDIA's $3.5 million, Apple's $2.5 million. So we're very profitable when you take a look at that discipline of how do you run a royalty company. So with that was the launch of it, and immediately we had this positive revenue and cash flow. I really, the hardest part I found on that journey was green energy. As Putin invaded Ukraine, immediately energy all over the world went up a penny per kilowatt. It just went up like that. And you just, nothing related to Eastern Europe, but energy all of a sudden became a new focus. And you saw a green energy in Canada all of a sudden do a lockdown for all types of data centers, not just Bitcoin mining. You saw Sweden put a tax on all data center consumption of energy. And so I think that this idea of recognizing the value of energy, and America is the most innovative. Like when you think of what's happened with fracking, and Hive has been really, I'm thrilled what we've done. We take in Lachute in Montreal, a 40,000 square foot, 30 megawatt Bitcoin facility, and we mine Bitcoin, but we capture that heat from the same molecule that comes from hydroelectricity, and we heat a liquid that goes across about 25 yards away, a building 200,000 square feet. So it's of a much bigger magnitude, fivefold bigger, has 175 workers in there making whirlpools for Quebec. So that idea that you can keep recycling, that innovation gets me all psyched up. We were the first to do what they call balancing the grid in Sweden. So rather than have to build a new dam for hydroelectricity, we can go from 30 megawatts to 3 megawatts in 15 seconds and then go back up. So in the morning when it's freezing cold, we're only 100 miles south of the Arctic Circle, we can go down quickly when everyone turns on their toasters and having a hot shower, and then in the evening. So that idea of balancing the grid and getting paid for it actually saves the community. They make money on wasted energy that wasn't being used. At the same time, we give back. So it's been a great experience for me of how do we recycle the molecules. But nothing compared to what America's going to do now with modular nuclear. I think it's wide open now with a guy like Elon Musk. What thought leadership, what besides financial, it's the thought leadership that he, in something like 100 and some odd days, he deployed 10,000 H100 NVIDIA chips. Like, it's mind-boggling what he did in AI and data center business. And so what does that mean? Well, that efficiency is going to show up in the government. It's going to basically say, well, can we cut 20% of the employees? Can we streamline all the regulations that we don't have to ever hire anyone over there? All that idea is going to be pushed with Elon Musk in that space. And I think it's phenomenal. And that just adds to, like I try to explain to people, Bitcoin is critical in the great digital transformation. And now Bitcoin is being accepted in America. It will have a huge positive change.
Yeah, and I think that going back to one of your prior comments, I'm cautiously optimistic that the page has been turned, so to speak, and that we are entering a new point in the conversation to where all of the like FUD and saying it's scammy and saying Bitcoin is a waste of energy and a bad thing, I really think that hopefully at this point that that's behind us and that this election cycle was the death knell for that. But I'm putting a pin in Bitcoin mining for a second. I want to return to the HPC and AI thing. You mentioned you're a macro investor. You were drawn to Bitcoin as part of your research. And Hive Digital was one of the first Bitcoin miners to really make this pivot to AI, right? Y'all had all of these ETH GPUs that you were using to mine ETH before the merge. Some of these ended up getting repurposed for other cryptocurrency mining, but the other thought was that you could use these for other computing purposes. What led Hive to that point to say we need to get into this industry really before the AI boom took off? Then I have another question to ask after that with regards to what your HPC strategy will be going forward, but we'll start with that one.
We thought I took a company public before COVID. I was the first AI company in Canada. And Canada is unique for venture capital, gold mining. 70% of gold mining exploration and high risk is in Canada. And that led it easy for me to be able to, and I understand the capital markets from all my gold funds, to go up there to launch what was called Gold Spot. And it was using AI, predominantly a group of PhDs out of Montreal, to assess exploration. And so that journey got me interested in, besides Hive is now public, Hive raises the capital. I put up 5 million, 30 million came behind it. It went public. Immediately institutions came in Canada. Fidelity ended up giving us 100 million. And then other institutions gave us another 100 million. And away we were in building data centers. At the beginning, it was Ethereum we were mining. And when you're mining Ethereum, you have to use GPU chips. GPU chips are much more like driving a Porsche, whereas a Bronco Jeep is much more like an ASIC chip. So it's recognizing the sensitivities and differences. So we had 130,000 AMD chips. We were 6% of the global network mining Ethereum at our peak. And everyone started coming in to pile into mining Ethereum. It was an interesting journey, but it was always very highly profitable business. And then we went into building out our Bitcoin. We got delays because as you know, crypto all fell off the cliff going into 18, 19. But we still pursued, and we bought assets at the first halving that I experienced in Quebec. And that gave me my first foothold into Quebec, into building out Bitcoin mining. When we built there, we bought, it was about 200 petahash, and now it's over 1 exahash. The same amount of electricity, just the idea of more efficient machines. And so we always want to be a portion of that. So our goal was at the beginning was to get the 1% of the global network. That was, and if you're a gold mining producer and you're 1% of all the gold mining production in the world, you get a real different status in capital markets, your valuation metrics, and you can get different economies of scale. So that was the goal. And then we ran into these challenges of electricity that was green, because our philosophy is always we want to have green coins. And so that path is building out. Over here, I've taken a company public. It's in the AI. I'm really curious about it. I'm learning more about NVIDIA chips. So we said we have to rebuy the chips because our AMD chips don't have enough memory to mine Ethereum because the DAG file is so big. And we were trying to add more memory chips to it, and it just wasn't as efficient. So we went out and bought about $70 million worth of suite of NVIDIA chips. The ones that we bought, unlike, say, Hut 8 could only mine Ethereum. We said, what is the risk of Ethereum going away? How can we double purpose these? Can we run them parallel? And that was the early envision of saying, because I had this love for this AI, because I saw what it could do in the gold mining industry. And so that was the process. So we became very good at understanding it. Ethereum disappeared when the tragic mistake they made is going to proof of stake from proof of work. For many reasons, I've written about it and talked about it. But more important is it gave us this knowledge. And what we realized is it wasn't as easy as you think when you take these chips. And what we were doing that was more profitable than, in fact, our ASIC chips at the beginning was mining the shit coins and using AI to convert to Bitcoin. So we're so big that we come into these altcoins, I'll be more polite now, and we come into these altcoins and we could all of a sudden be more than 50%. That big. I mean, we got worried about Ethereum Classic that we were going to basically crush that at market. So we would see anomalies that would say high profit margin, mine, convert to Bitcoin, sell right away, stop. Next. So we were rotating all around. And it looked like playing hockey out there with the puck, chasing that puck around, and who's open, slap it over there. There's an open person, it was, and that allowed us to make, like today in our chips that we're mining, we're making much more than Bitcoin mining. So today we're making 12 cents an hour. So we break everything down by the hour. And Anthony Powers has said we're the most efficient miners for this concept of how we function. And we're getting on our old NVIDIA chips $1 an hour. As a business person, that is a wow. I've written
Is that
I
is
got
that
all the
on
money back mining Ethereum. Then I start doing the other coins, and now I'm repurposing them. Well, in that journey of repurposing is much more complex. You got these coders calling you up and saying, oh, what are your cables? What do you mean your cables? So you have to basically get a super micro server. You slot in 10 of the NVIDIAs, and then and they have CPUs on them. So what are the cables you're using? Well, they'll pay you more, 8 cents an hour, 10 cents an hour if you have Juniper cables. Whatever thought, you mean Juniper cables, not your normal cables that hook them up. No, because it's like a corpus callosum between the left and right hemisphere of your brain. And so they will pay you more for that, those people that are doing this contract. So our model at first was not your normal data center. It was to go on these platforms that basically rent out that people need your machines for 1 day to.
And this is on demand, basically.
On demand.
And so when you're saying a dollar per, you're saying $1 per kilowatt hour, is that?
Yeah, dollar.
And that's using these services, these platforms where people need to rent out computing power for whatever they're doing. Maybe they're rendering something, maybe they're trying to test an environment for an AI tool, things like that, right?
Yeah. And the purpose was to show how do we use the same intellectual capital? What does the core team learn rather than hiring a bunch of people? And so our goal was to get up to this critical mass, in which we found we were growing faster than the platforms. Just like mining all the Kaka coins, you know.
When you say you were growing faster than the platforms, are you saying like you had too much demand?
No, we could provide too much supply for the demand that was growing with AI. Unless you get a contract with a healthcare unit or a hospital or a lot of financial institutions, the biggest buyer of these NVIDIA chips in Canada is the Royal Bank of Canada. They're the biggest in using AI for risk management and customer knowledge. And so we're going along, but what's really sweet about it is we're doing close to 800,000 a month in free cash flow. The same guys, I've learned this, repurposed only 10% of our machines, and all of a sudden they're making money. You know, and it's high profit margin business. So now we've been buying H100s, and they're much bigger demand. And so you will see as we go on, we will repurpose our data centers, in particular in Canada, and we have in Sweden. And that's what took place this year. So let's come back to AWS goes nuclear. All of a sudden, there's this huge demand. CoreWeave comes in to try to take over Core Scientific and then cuts a deal to develop their facilities. They're going to spend $7 million a megawatt. So for your listeners, this is simple math. 1 megawatt for building out for Bitcoin mining, simple numbers. If you're in Northern Canada, Sweden, Iceland, you got to think of $1 million per megawatt. That's roughly the capex. If it is tier 3 for HPC AI, it's 10 million. So your front end load is 10 times the size. The chips are also much more expensive, but the revenue line is much more predictable.
Right.
And you can get contracts that are out there. So our journey was, how do we repurpose what we already paid for? How do we get additional free cash flow from it as we go in the data center? So then it came out with a sort of moratorium in Canada and many other places. You can't come in and build these high performance computing. It could take 3 to 5 years. But if you already have a data center, then you can get done in 9 months. So we said, okay, well, we have 80 megawatts in New Brunswick on the border of Maine. We can take 20 megawatts and we can convert that into HPC, and we can do that very quickly, get the drawings done, and that's what we've done. And that would be a $200 million spend. And then you got to spend another $200 million on NVIDIA H100, 200 chips. That's okay because it's $200 million in revenue.
So
it's big revenue.
Right. And so Hive's current HPC deployments are retrofitted Bitcoin mines. Am I understanding that correctly? Or are the computers are not hosted somewhere else.
They're hosted somewhere else. They're downtown
Okay.
Stockholm and downtown Montreal.
Okay, that's what I thought. But then that leads into my next question. Will Hive take the core scientific route and do a retrofitting job on your existing facilities to try to scale?
Correct. That's what we will do. And the difference between them and us, we're not just going to sell our facility. We want to own the machines and partner. So we'll be hiring the normal data center model, a president for that part of the business, marketing, technicians. As we're building out those data centers, we will hire all the staff around them, and we believe we're very incredibly price competitive. And what I like about the data center business, when you're just a pure data center, you're trading at 22 times EBITDA, 22 times. I mean, if Hive was at 22 times a day, the stock would be probably pushing, with Bitcoin where it is today, it'd be pushing 2 billion. And that would mean you would have, a market cap, a stock with price would be pushing $20. I mean, that is that re-rating that takes place. So, but we have to go build that out to get that re-rating. But it's no longer just blue sky. It's now the brownfield, that build out. And that's what we're very excited about. So we're going to own the facilities. We own the land. We have the long power contracts. And then we said, well, what are we going to do to expand our Bitcoin operations? Like, besides upgrading the machinery with more energy efficient chips, ASIC chips, it was Paraguay. And my journey in Paraguay was I really enjoyed it, because the president, I went down, I met with the president. I was really disappointed. They put this tariff tax on Bitcoin mining. They have other political issues in the place, but let me share with you, it's so key.
Well, so can we put a pin in Paraguay for just a second, because I want to close on that, but I just have a few more questions about the HPC stuff.
Okay,
it's really good. You're a ball of energy, man. I love it. Like, there's so many places to go and so many things to talk about. And I'm really enjoying this, but I want to just put
all right, let's go. AI
for a second. So will Hive look for a partner like a CoreWeave in this HPC retrofit, or will it continue to do what it's currently done and leverage some of these kind of on-demand platforms for renting out the computing power on an ad hoc basis? What will the business model look like in the future when these retrofits are done and active?
That's a great question. I think right now we always try to run parallel. That is, first we build out, we learn the business. Now we're hiring people that really know the data, HPC, building data centers. They know everything about that world, and we know enough that where we've taken it's great cash flow for us. But we want to scale that 10 million of free cash flow to 50 million quickly. So you have to hire that team. Maybe a CoreWeave or someone like that's going to come knocking on the door. I don't know. But I do know that who we're hiring, we're going to hire the other people that are going to knock on the doors to sell and say, look, at government, we're going to have this facility. This is a contract. Go through that normal process, because there's no big HPC in Eastern Canada where we are. And it's on the border of Maine, which means it's also, from a latency, it's close to Boston, with all the research and universities, and more money is going into AI. So we feel that we're going to be able to connect those dots. A CoreWeave, something like that, may come knocking on the door. But we just want to right now just continue with the building. The vision is, we're going to own the land. We're going to own the data center. We're going to build it. We're not going to go to a CoreWeave to build our data center. We're going to do that. We're going to have a real asset that I believe is going to, down the road, get that 22 times EBITDA.
And where will these facilities be in Canada? Will they be in your European facilities in Sweden?
They'll be in Sweden and Canada. Okay. That's where we're starting.
Got it. Okay. Now,
and last thing with it is, I think, important. In America, there's in the Bitcoin ecosystem, no one cares if you're green. They don't care. That's fine. But to get the deal where we were the only ones to create and build our own chip with Intel was because we're green. And with NVIDIA was the same thing. To be a platinum level, the green element is very important for them. And and when you deal with NVIDIA, they're really concerned about the customer experience, because they believe if if you don't have a good experience with us, that is Buzz data centers, as it's called, if you don't have that, they're worried that you're not going to really be upset with Buzz, you're going to be upset with NVIDIA. So they're very concerned about the overall, what is the standards of care, the people you have, your green energy, all these components are very important in that dialogue. So we are a platinum customer and have a very strong relationship with NVIDIA.
Okay. So the green energy question lends itself to my next question of why Paraguay? Obviously, one of the largest hydroelectric producers in the world. You know, the Itaipu Dam, I believe, is the second or third largest dam in terms of hydroelectric capacity in the entire world. Is the move to Paraguay partially because you're looking for that green energy and it's much harder to get power capacity in Canada and in the other data centers or with the other power markets that you're operating within Europe? Has it been difficult to expand in those areas, and so you need to look elsewhere for that power?
It's all of the above.
Okay.
You know, there's no doubt, trying to get scale where we could double and triple, and to get 2%, we want to be 2% minimum of the global network of Bitcoin mining and hold as many Bitcoins as possible. That's our vision. And so Paraguay, there's other places in Latin America that offered, like I could get a penny cheaper in Argentina, but it's just too difficult to deal in Argentina. When you go to a lot of these countries, which my experience comes from the gold and oil and gas funding companies throughout Latin America, is a lot of the sort of like envy policies, and they don't like America, like as a jealousy type of concept to appreciate, but not Paraguay. Paraguay loves America. Well, you got to ask, like, why? What is it that they love America? In 1860-70, there was a tragic war with Brazil and Argentina and Uruguay basically wiping out going down to 12-year-old boys in Paraguay military. And it was President Hayes from America that said no, and he settled the land, and this is Paraguay, and basically was the peace treaty. And there's an important county, or you would call a state, like a state in America, in Paraguay, is called Hayes. It's not. Wow. It's not Garcia.
I had no idea about this. We're getting an amazing history lesson on the Bitcoin Stock Show today. Not a direction we usually take it in. So a very pro-America, business-friendly environment in Paraguay, it sounds like.
Yes. And so you find that Paraguay's right in the middle of South America, and America has reconnaissance for all of Latin America in Paraguay. So they can monitor what the Chinese are doing in Brazil. And Brazil is Lula changes the constitution, comes back. He's a communist, hates America. The whole that whole journey, what they have, they're just envious and they're corrupt. And it's just what it is, and you have to recognize like what those countries are. Now, when you go to Paraguay, they're much more do business. The corruption is different, as they would say. It's basically 10 families control 90% of the country's economics. You meet families that have 12 private equity type businesses. So where'd you go to school? I went to University of Columbia. Oh, I went to Yale. I went to MIT. I went to Harvard. You went where? They all went to American schools, and they've gone back, and their families are running everything like an American business model. And the U.S. government is after the richest guy in Paraguay, and that's that. All the politics over here is different issues this guy has, and when you look at the country as a whole, totally different than Colombia. Petro, he's pro Hamas, he's pro Iran. Same thing with Venezuela. He wants to cut back the military, which helps all the narco trade going into Venezuela. A complete different view of looking at our country. So I was thrilled. I went down. I'm disappointed on this tax tariff. I think it'll eventually get resolved. But why do they need Bitcoin miners? This is the really interesting part. Because they've been selling energy, surplus energy, for a penny to 2 pennies to wonderful countries like Argentina that is no pay. They don't get paid. So Milei comes in, and after 2 years, they finally got 50% of their money. They got 100 million out of the 200 million that's owed them. So they go and sell to Bolivia. There's always a payment problem. But Bitcoin mining, they get paid every month. What do they get paid with? US dollars. Do you think that their banks have the capital base to put on a currency hedge to protect US dollars? No, they don't have that capital base. So you realize that you are facilitating a government, like we are facilitating utility companies in Sweden to have this surplus wasted energy. And in Sweden, where we are, we funded the hockey arena. We fund 12 hockey teams. Hockey is everything, like football in Texas, Friday football, everything is hockey. They have 3 retired players that won Stanley Cup playoffs. So it realizes that it's a Hive arena because we are helping everything we are in the community. Now we go to this country, and I really believe we're helping the whole country. We are the currency hedge. We are public, so we are transparent. There's no corruption. There's no country coming from like China and that builds a facility, etc. This is all transparent. So I'm really thrilled about us being sort of financial ambassadors for the country.
So with the Paraguay expansion, Hive is basically going to more than double its hash rate, assuming everything goes according to plan. Where are y'all what stage are y'all at currently with the expansion? And what is the rough timeline for when this thing will be fully online?
We think that we're told, it's a great question because it was asked yesterday, that it is between March and June, and it's looking like electrical, we're going through the power stations by May. But that's
next year.
Yeah, 25.
Okay.
Yeah. And so we've already broken ground. We bought land. We bought other land around it. We have many hectares in that whole area, building the parts coming in for the substation. That the process to build, the bureaucracy there is so small. And all you have to do is get electrical engineers to certify the building of the substation.
So the exact opposite experience of operating in a jurisdiction like Canada, perhaps.
Years. It's literally years. And if you have brownfield in Canada, it could be 5 years. If you have, brownfield would be 3 years. If you have greenfields there, it's 5 years.
Wow. But in Paraguay, it's like that. Got the deposit, I got the land. We're just going to start building. So it seems like
have electrical engineering drawings. You have to have all those those components that are involved with it. And so I met with engineering companies down there. I met with people that built facilities for other people. And it was interesting because 2 weeks ago I was at Plan B and in Lugano in Switzerland. And just that dimension I mentioned earlier in the show, like how big they've grown, that they have an average account size only $4,000, but they have 300 million people. It's amazing how many people want to feel safe with their financial component, and they're doing that. Well, they're there. They are mining their own Bitcoin in Paraguay. They went to Uruguay, but Uruguay is much more sort of left in the mindset and green. And so the cost of energy and it's been more.
Well, they've got a bunch of wind. They've got a bunch of wind turbines that they've started erecting. And if studying Bitcoin mining and energy systems has taught me anything, it's if you're putting up too many wind turbines, you're probably going to have a bad time, and energy prices are going to end up going up, right?
Yes, and they're just not commercially viable.
Right. No, especially not for Bitcoin miners, unless you find a little niche for yourself and you decide to mine during, off peak hours with excess energy from something like turbines or solar panels. But anyway, all that being said, so with Paraguay, it seems like the regulatory tape is very thin and it's easy to get something off the ground. But there are some things that I've heard about.
I wouldn't say it's so much thin; it's just much more efficient.
Okay.
They've been much more efficient, but they have highly skilled engineers, etc., that live there. They also have, what's interesting, you don't see the graffiti. I'll give you another real classic in my journey. In Lima, you don't talk on your cell phone in your Uber. The Uber driver try to put it away. Someone will smash the window and steal that iPhone. You see graffitis all over the buildings at nighttime. They come down with metal shields over them. You don't see that in Paraguay. You can talk on the telephone. In Bogota, you don't, even the best area, you don't walk on the street talking on your phone. You'll be set up with 3 people, one that bang you, one that's grab the phone, and another one to hit you afterwards when you try to get up to go get your phone. It's a different world. So you say, well, their GDP per capita is so low. How does it function? 10% basically flat tax.
Well, you're saying the tax, how does the tax relate to public safety?
So when you're in Colombia, it has a higher GDP per capita, but it has a much higher income tax. Doesn't matter if you're middle class, doesn't matter whatever it is. The taxes are much more onerous, whereas in Paraguay, it's like a flat tax. So people actually, do better. And energy, the cost of electricity is inexpensive. It's very.
And they also have a constitutional amendment, right, about or some sort of a constitutional provision that they have to provide energy to, or like Andy has to provide energy to all of the citizens or something like that. I could be totally butchering this, but energy access is is baked into their laws, partially because they have this huge dam, right? And it's only a country of 6 million people, I think, right?
And it's 4 times the size of UK.
Yeah, right. So it's obviously just an incredible abundance of energy. It makes sense why Bitcoin miners are going there. But going back to the regulation bit, you talked about the tariffs coming, the tariffs and the taxes for importation of ASICs and things like that. I know that the government has had some issues with what I call cowboy miners, people coming in and drawing electricity without formal PPAs in place, without really approaching the government or Andy and talking about what they're going to do. That hasn't seemed to disrupt or impede any of the legal miners in Paraguay, though. Am I correct?
No, they all got shut down. They've confiscated all the machines. And someone was asking, well, how can we recharge the machines? Can we get in the business? And they just don't have it in their constitution. They could do that. It'd be a political part. But I was talking to people that are doing it in Ethiopia, and the government is part of the cap table. So in Ethiopia, they will, if the government gets a piece of the action, then let's say they get 10% of the profits of the gains of Bitcoin, they will give you 2 cents electricity. But you have to build everything. They've got the power, they got the dam, but someone has to build the big substations and build all that infrastructure around it. That would be your cost along with the machines, and they would give you a 10-year cheap electricity agreement, but they want a piece of the upside. They're a piece of the cap table. They can do that in Ethiopia. In Paraguay, it would be a big political, like a constitutional amendment.
Right. Well, one final question for you, Frank. But before we do that, we've had almost 15,000 people tune into this. That's a new record for the Bitcoin Stock Show. So I appreciate you coming on and being a part of this. Yeah. So, and a quick plug for the Mining Pod. Please go over to our X page. Follow us at the Mining Pod. You can subscribe to our newsletter at you can subscribe to our newsletter at miningpod.blockspace.media. You can find us on YouTube at the Mining Pod, and also we have all of our other properties there for Blockspace Media, like Bitcoin Season 2, all of our other shows. Go subscribe and follow all of the suite of our offerings, please. We'd really appreciate it. And we appreciate everyone tuning in. Thank you all so much. But Frank, before we go, last question for you. What will be the biggest trend for Bitcoin miners in the coming year, or let's say coming 4 years now that we are having a shift to the right in the United States?
I think it'll be regulations. It's sort of sad that a little island like Bermuda has had regulations for 3 years, and Coinbase ends up having an office there and infrastructure. So I think the big part will be some thoughtful regulations, and I think that will be a key factor because so many other countries in the world follow the leadership of our regulatory world.
That would make sense to me. Frank, before we go, where can people find you? Where can people find Hive? Use this opportunity for your own plug for the Bitcoin mining company you founded.
Well, it's Hive Digital Technology. Hive is the ticker, HIVE, NASDAQ, Germany, and Canada. I think we're on YouTube. We produce a lot of content. We have it in many languages on the FUD for Energy. We take Michael Saylor's presentation from 30 minutes to 3 minutes. So there's lots of great content on our YouTube channel. So you can go there. And if you go to Hive Digital, you will be able to get and sign up for our newsletter. And we're going to make sure that to our 40,000 and I think followers we have, I'm going to put also for my U.S. global investors, which was the seed investor for creating of Hive. We're going to send out to the 100,000 readers we have in 80 countries. So thank you for this opportunity to share our story.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, Frank. Really enjoyed this conversation. Hope to have you on again sometime soon. And for all of our listeners, thank you all for tuning in. If you're tuning in at the end of this, you can find this on our YouTube page, and it will also be published on Spotify, Apple, Anchor, wherever you can find the Mining Pod podcast. And with that, deuces, y'all. Everyone have a good week. And Frank, once again, thank you for joining. Hope you
and remember to look up. Look up. That's how Bitcoin's going.
Well said. Cheers, man. Appreciate you joining.
Take care. Bye.
And